hello. Good timing. It is Friday again. And roughly as predictable as the arrival of Friday was the verdict in the white nationalist mass shooter case in Kenosha, which is where the key case witnesses were intimidated systematically by people who were proved to be connected directly to defense counsel, and to quote one of the witnesses, the prosecution didn't give a shit. It's like, for me, I've been pissed off about the whole thing. It's like, okay. The way people will sometimes begin the grieving process, sometimes years in advance when they've got a loved one who's terminally ill, and so there isn't so much the expected explosion of grief when they do eventually die. For me, it's very similar. It's like, I knew this was going to be bullshit from the start. I mean, you had this cartoonishly partisan judge who actually... he just did not even pretend to be ruling objectively. You had a prosecutor who just didn't give a fuck and was totally reluctant to be prosecuting the case. And you had a bunch of witnesses who were often intimidated out of giving evidence. The fix was in from the start on this one. This white nationalist mass shooter got the cop treatment. So it's like, I've just been sort of like dosing my pissed offness about this from the beginning. God. This fucking judge who... Okay, the defense decided that the evidence of the video of the shooting, the actual shooting, was filmed using new and unknown technology, i.e. a digital camera. Loner Box is a new one to me. I saw that take, and it sounded initially like defending the shooter, but then they also said some stuff that sounded more on the lines of that we need to also be talking about the fucking parents who groomed this 17-year-old into being a weapon of white nationalism, and that I agree. The parents really have not gotten anywhere near the amount of shit they deserve. This would not have happened without them, very literally. Apparently his mother now denies being the one to have driven him across state lines with the illegal firearm. But, the grooming was still a reality, and that is an essential aspect of all of this. They absolutely need to be... Oh god, yeah, I saw that. Jesus Christ. He just finds all sorts of ways to just say shit that sucks. That seems to be his brand now. I guess, did we really need an older Xanderhall? But then, Peter Casket did have to be shamed out of sharing a platform without white nationalists at one point, so... okay, at least he was shameable in that instance. I guess, small mercies or whatever, but Jesus Christ, the fact that he would be willing to share the platform with them in the first place? That was all I needed to know about them. I know, I remember that too. Like, a couple of years ago, I remember every time I heard things from them... sorry, it is them. I don't talk about them very often, so it just was not front of mind. But, I actually followed them on Twitter because they seem to be saying some sensible stuff. But then, I mean, this shit has just been off the... I mean, it seems to be around the time that they decided that being non-binary was a source of social capital, seems to be when they switched over to just reactionary bullshit. I mean, what gets me about this is it's also just an example of the ruling class not entirely knowing how to do themselves favors. Because the proper counterinsurgency response to all this was to find some way to ensure a conviction. It wouldn't have been hard. A plea actually could have done it. And, I mean, you could intimidate just about anyone into a plea deal. And Rittenhouse's lawyer... let me put it this way. This prick sent death threats to his wife using text messages. Which is to say that in addition to being a piece of shit as a person, he's also a shitty defense lawyer. Because a good defense lawyer knows that you don't do that shit by text message, because that will come back to you, and it did. But not all that badly. He said he didn't mean it, and he was sorry, and he got away with it. But the high art of criminal defense is to get away with it without ever having to answer for it at all. Yeah, I mean, what this guy is known for, this prick Pierce, is... intimidating witnesses. He sends goons round to adverse parties and adverse witnesses and makes them reconsider their current place of residence. And in this case, one street medic who got paid a visit by this guy's goons, they were later determined to be definitely employed by defense counsel, moved interstate, moved 2,000 miles to California just out of fear for her own safety. Told the prosecutors about it. The prosecutors have resources for witness protection and that sort of thing. That isn't something that they are powerless to deal with. They can pay for a key witness to travel. They can pay for a key witness to have some kind of safe accommodation until they've given their evidence. And none of that was offered. I spoke to her because she had actually decided to get back on Twitter to talk about it. And she'd posted this article, this interview she gave to Mother Jones at the time. This is like at the very beginning of this shit show of a trial. And it didn't say anything about whether the prosecution had done anything about this. So I had been curious and asked her, and she said, yeah, they didn't give a shit. That's a quote. So, I mean, this was just an absolute joke from the start. Okay, that's fine. I will be rapiding for a little bit longer. And then I will probably be paying a visit to Xanderhole. Okay. Up 2 pawns. But otherwise, yeah, equal on the exchange. Still a chance for a back rank. And there's still a possibility of some shit involving this pawn. Yeah, not happy with that pawn. Not happy with it at all. Okay, well... Oh shit. There's mate in 1. Yeah, well, let's see if Ash makes it splash notices that there's mate in 1. Having a bit of a think about it, clearly. Glad I finally worked out how to get the crop on that chat window correct. Oh. Didn't notice. Need balls. Well, the advantage of this annoying little white pawn there is, of course, that black can't take their own, that white can't take their own pawn. Either way, I end up with still having a queen and taking the rook with check. Okay, what do I do now? Yes, white can't take its own pawn. That's how Rittenhouse got off, really. Okay, there we go. That's that passed pawn gone. Again, with check. That's nice. Okay. Okay, there we go. Ash may be making it splash, but... this endgame is looking a bit like a car crash. Oh, well, yes. Yes, after a couple of reciprocated blunders, I managed to get back into the saddle. And now we've got a... oh, bollocks. There we go. And... GG. Nice. I like it when I win on stream. I usually get my ass kicked on stream, and it's... I mean, once or twice, you know, occasionally is one thing, but... every single time, you wouldn't want to make a steady diet of it. Welcome back. And I think we're gonna return to Xanderhole for a while, especially... we actually got started on time for a change. That's a new one. Okay, let's get that background volume back up so that I don't have to spend time normalizing the volume on Xanderhole's voice when I clip this thing into content. Where is it? Should the left accept ex-Nazis? The ongoing series. Wonder if Jesse, who was the caller, will be joining us in chat again. That was kind of cool.
You know, I've been called the R slur, so it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, it's like... it's...
oh, that's right. We're talking about... this is just another example of just sort of browbeating somebody with prep. Because the issue... this has been made an issue here about whether racial slurs and ableist slurs are equal in badness. That was the last thing. And... I, as much as it pains me to say it, because he's doing this very disingenuously, Xanderhole has taken the correct position that actually they are. None's better than the other. They're all unacceptable. But the point is, which is why it was also just a mistake to be making it about that, apart from just being wrong. Because the point here that was being made is that the slurs and insults and anything else that's directed at Xanderhole will have less of an effect because he's a white prick with a platform, and that's not the same thing as the stuff that, say, Nazis direct at marginalized people.
It's to a point to where it's like... I mean, I never say it, and I don't
well,
know
hello there.
Say it at all, but man, if somebody that says that, I just laugh at them.
Perfect timing.
They're probably, you know, got problems. So, anyway, I just think that I guess if you were just a little bit more open to be like, hey, look, this is just for middle of the road and right wingers here.
Yeah, but that would be giving away the game. Yes, it is just for, like, middle of the road and right wingers, people who are right wingers and adjacent to the right wing. Yeah, I mean, when he says this isn't a safe space, and he very much does mean that in the sense that we use that as in a space where abusive behavior isn't acceptable. He's saying it is a place where abusive shit is very much acceptable. Which it has to be, because otherwise it wouldn't accept him, and then he'd be kicked out of his own channel and his own creepy ass toxic community. But yeah, So, okay, I'm kind of curious what's he going to
You're
say
all
to this.
welcome. You know, leftists, you kind of just, want to go somewhere else, like that's what it kind of seems like you're doing.
Yeah, it is what he's doing, but he can't admit to that, surely.
I mean,
And
like I'm just I'm blown away at everything that you said here because it seems like almost everything every opinion that you put forth to me here is unbelievably counterproductive, and I would even go as
Oh,
far
yeah,
as to
okay,
say
so he's
not even
changing the
leftist. Like the
subject.
idea that people need to pay the price for bad things that they've done in the past is like
Okay, yes, the idea that ex-Nazis have to earn trust, which would require Zanderhol to earn trust, and he doesn't want to earn trust because he knows that he isn't worthy of it, really. Yeah.
I just said they had. I didn't think they should. But you're saying that somebody who has spent time in jail.
See, I don't think that's something that you have to concede on. I think it is entirely right. People have a right, especially in, say, revolutionary groups, dissident groups, groups that actually have to worry about violence from Fash and the state, do have every reason to demand that somebody who has those sorts of associations needs to earn that trust. That if they want to be accepted in those spaces, they need to prove that they really are worthy of that trust, that they really are for real. I think that's an entirely reasonable thing, and I think that really it's a good litmus test in the end, because any Nazi, any ex-Nazi who does not understand why people, especially, marginalized people, people who have to worry about being targeted by fascists, would be skeptical, distrustful, maybe even downright hostile to them, is not enough of an ex-Nazi, because they clearly have not realized just how fucked up what they were involved in was and the effect that has on other people. Like Sanderhol here, he either doesn't know or doesn't care what effect that stuff has on other people, because he was acting like it was just changing an opinion.
Getting and got reformed and been out has actually had to pay a price for it. Not like I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying you're comparing somebody that's like spent years of their life away from everything.
You
to think about
specifically
it.
said that they have to pay the price.
No, I didn't say they have to. I said they had paid the price. I didn't say like I think they should. I meant you're comparing somebody.
I mean, this is just such a self-serving position for him to take. Because the thing is, I mean, he tries to put this under the heading of the restorative justice, but the thing about restorative justice is that word restorative. See, the reason it's called that is because whatever was harmed is, to the extent that is possible, restored. In this case, would need to be restored is the trust of all decent people. Because somebody who actually takes the step of joining, with neo-Nazis and deciding that that's what they want to dedicate their lives to, has actually abused the trust of, everybody that they have to live with in a society, really, except for, well, just fucking Nazis and people who Nazis are okay with. I mean, he wants to have, like, it reminds me of, I heard this was like this ridiculous hot take around Joe Biden and Tara Reid, where the idea was that by running for president, and not ever acknowledging what he did to Tara Reid, that he was, that was restorative justice. That he could be electable and accountable, even though he didn't admit it, didn't actually apologize for it, didn't show any remorse for that or for any of the other sexual harassment and shit. But that was restorative justice because basically it allowed him to do whatever the hell he wanted, and we were going to just call it that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about this sort of debate format, because it is all about prep. And it is easy to get just kind of tied up in bullshit and end up arguing against yourself, or just accepting framing of the issue that you really don't have to. I mean, it's like playing blitz chess. I mean, you can go back and look at it and you realize, oh shit, there was absolutely no reason I had to do that. But in this context, it creates this artificial context where you basically uh, don't have the time to really consider an issue and make a response, and so you can easily end up saying saying something you don't even actually agree with in it, because it becomes a negotiation around the truth or you know the correct position or whatever, rather than whoever is best prepared with talking points and stuff wins. I mean, that's why I just don't think it's such a useful thing to do, that kind of debate. But yeah, I mean, this idea that you can have restored, the way he uses the term restorative justice, it means an absence of consequences. Yeah, it means you don't have to do anything different. You just have to say, I'm not doing that horrible shit anymore. And everybody just has to accept you, basically. And that's bullshit. That's not how any of this works. It is as bullshit as his interesting definition of moral luck from a couple of weeks ago.
Who
It's really cool, actually. I'm glad that I decided to do this long one and just kind of continue it over weeks, because we get to really kind of look at ideas in depth a bit. And I'm enjoying that. It allows me to sort of springboard off some of this, and it gets interesting. There are like interesting issues being raised by entirely by accident here.
was a shithead Nazi. Nobody kind of knows about it. They can just say I'm better now to somebody who has gone to prison.
You're
Spent a bunch of time in prison and is probably more reformed and come out. You're saying that it's like that's like the same. It's just a bad comparison.
You see, I mean, and there it's like, I really would seriously doubt that a Nazi who goes to prison would be more likely to be reformed than somebody who just realizes what they did was fucked up. Because, I mean, is somebody who was white nationalist outside is gonna have much less. I mean, the white nationalist culture and like white nationalist gangs in the prisons are already extremely powerful in the whole fucked up segregated ecology that is this prison archipelago we have in this country. But somebody like that is probably going to come out more radicalized. I mean, I think it's actually less likely that they're going to be at all, ideologically reconstructed after the experience, because the whole thing is kind of designed to confirm their fucked up worldview.
And I think is like when you're comparing them to.
How's the audio on this? How's the audio of this video, by the way? I want to just make sure I don't need to turn it up. Excellent.
To people that have like literally gone to prison,
okay. I mean, this is gonna go up. This debate will go up as a video on YouTube. So if you want to rewatch it, you can see where you said multiple times that like you don't believe that ex-Nazis have atoned enough because they haven't paid the price. I mean, you've said it multiple times.
Which, I mean, that isn't wrong. I mean, he's really just offended by the idea that people who were involved with racist violence should have to actually do anything to get in the good graces of other people after that. He's really offended by that idea, and it just seems convenient. Like, fucking hell, even his little Xander Hall emblem is like a slightly stylized swastika, actually, I'm noticing now. Look at the bottom right corner of the video.
I don't think that. I just said that they hadn't paid the price than somebody in prison. I wasn't saying that they have to pay the price. I'm not saying that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you had, I wouldn't actually. That's a fairly broad description, to pay a price. That can mean a lot of things. And I wouldn't say that that's strictly wrong.
Go back and watch the video. I didn't.
I mean, it's gonna go up as a video. Yeah, the recording on my hard drive filled up. So
put it all up right now.
Right now.
Bring it all the way up to here. Yeah, bring it all the way up to here. Don't cut it out. Don't
Well,
cut it. Just do
I don't
all
I don't
raw.
cut I don't cut any. Trust me, this
All
debate
right.
is good content. I have no.
Oh, I agree. This is wonderful content. Hell. Well, like, just click on one of his videos at random. You see it. It fills the entire screen at the beginning. It's like his Vorspann, his intro. And you'll see it, and it's like this X, except where with sort of rhomboid cross lines in a way that looks like if you were to sort of take a file and whittle down a wooden swastika, basically.
I have no restraint or.
Well, I don't know if we've gotten anywhere. I don't know if we've even
It's
gotten
good
anywhere.
content. My chat has been laughing at you, so it's good content.
Oh, it doesn't. I don't give a shit. Like, that doesn't matter.
Do you understand why everything, every belief?
I'm trying to show you what you're doing to the people of color.
I've been.
And
wait, what am I doing to people of
gay.
color? What am I doing to people of color?
You're
Well, you're I mean, you're telling them that they need to accept self-declared ex-Nazis and should don't have any right to, withhold their trust until they see that there's a reason to extend that trust. That's a pretty fucked up thing to do to them.
you're telling them to leave and giving a seat to somebody who can just say I'm an ex-Nazi and doesn't do anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is not what's happening.
That is literally what's happening, and he's said it more than once. And now he actually confirmed it a couple of videos ago, a couple of segments ago. This is the first time he's denied that.
There is a social
You're totally
space.
doing that.
If
That
there
is
is a
exactly
social
what you're doing.
space, if there is a social space like my community, and there
Like
are
you, I
two
guess.
people, and there are two people who have a disagreement with each other because of some past beef, because one of them is a Nazi, one of them is a person of color, and that Nazi happened to know that
It's not a past beef.
other person and called them a slur or something online, and they don't like each other,
Assaulted them,
that is for them to
or-
deal with until it becomes such an issue that I have to get involved and intervene in some way because it's starting to interrupt the ability for the community to function.
Well, except that it already is, because okay, what's not clear from this, I mean, is what's happened since then. That is he just present? Has he shown any willingness to make amends? That said anything to indicate that he realizes how absolutely fucked up? I mean, I think the absolute minimum somebody like that in that position, a genuine former Nazi, somebody who actually realizes has ideologically reconstructed themselves. I don't like that terminology, but it's what I'm coming up with right now. Would be to offer to be the one to leave. That would be a totally reasonable thing to expect of them, especially if their presence is inherently making that person uncomfortable, which they have every right to be made uncomfortable by it. It is a reasonable thing. You shouldn't... I mean, sometimes to me, it's not actually all that different from going to a party and seeing a guy who sexually assaulted you at another party who you actually had good reason to believe would not be allowed to come to any of these parties anymore. I mean, just to get a random experience from my own fucking biography, it's like you're allowed to be uncomfortable with that, and you should not be the one to be expected to leave. I mean, that's just fucked up. And that is already interfering. If it is creating this sort of friction, then it is already interfering with the functioning of the social space.
And it's starting to cause everyone to have a
person
bad
of color
time.
so the person of color, you just got to be cool with it, bro. That's what you're saying. You just got to be cool with it or get out of here. So I'm just
If
saying.
they're
That
being
is
made
what he said
uncomfortable,
before.
if they're
I'm not
being
saying
made
you do
uncomfortable by the
everything
presence
what
of
you
someone
look
who's
like.
not a Nazi anymore, then it is up to them whether or not they want to stick around
All
or
Yeah, okay, here he is.
they
Go
have to
away.
do is say it. All they
I mean, because he's already made it clear that there is no standard for him when it comes to whether somebody is actually not a Nazi anymore. They just have to say it. I mean, Matthew fucking Heimbach said it. And then he went on to, refound the Traditional Workers' Party on the exact same lines. I mean, and he gave this fucked up interview with David Rovix, where David Rovix actually ended up being the more anti-Semitic one in that interview, which was kind of something that was remarkable. But I mean, anyone can say that they have changed. It's much harder to actually show, and people who are harmed by what you did do have a right to actually see some proof of that.
They have to do is say it. They don't have
No,
to
they
do a full
don't.
or arc video. Well, you did.
I mean, even an ARC video, Jesus Christ. I mean, that shows a certain amount of introspection, I suppose, but it's still a damn low standard, really. I mean, because, anyone can make a video like that. I mean, okay, not necessarily the production values, the technological aspect of it, assuming that that's taken care of. Pretty much anyone could make a video where they say, this is what I used to be like, and this was what I think now. And it doesn't necessarily have to even be fucking true. And it doesn't prove anything.
You did this whole video so everybody knows
Because I'm a YouTuber.
left you are and you're online.
Wait, do
Right.
you think that to be
Okay,
accepted
so
that
if
people have to
everybody
make
was
a
like that,
video?
See, here, I mean, this is disingenuous, too, because it's like, he gives one example here. Sorry, Jesse, since I got you here, I've been calling you he, is that correct for you? Or is there something you'd prefer? Just occurred to me that, I might want to, that it would be a good idea to just make sure about that. But, I mean, so fucking Xanderhole takes is something that is offered as one example, and it tries to take that as the only thing. Like, oh, okay, good. I kind of thought so. I mean, sometimes you have a feeling about what will probably be accepted, but it just occurred to me it would probably be good to make sure. So, okay, cool. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not used to having people who are in the videos I'm reacting to in the chat so I can ask them questions like this. It's actually kind of a neat experience. It's just such a disingenuous way he's
If everybody
arguing
was
this.
like that, it might be a lot easier for people. I'm not saying they have to do it, but it's like, that's so easy for everybody to go, oh yeah, he's totally cool. Most of these people, we're just going by their word, and it's tough, because a lot of people have been.
Because you can only go off of the word of what someone says and their behaviors and their actions.
Well, yeah, except that every time that Jesse here is trying to give an example of a sort of standard that involves their actions in order to verify whether their word is worth anything, Xanderhole immediately jumps on it and acts like, oh, that's totally unreasonable. How can you demand that everybody make a YouTube video? Or I mean, this is just he's so fucking dishonest.
If what they say matches their behaviors and their actions, there is most likely no reason to suspect that they are lying.
Except the thing is that with people who are already admittedly involved with Fash, yeah, there's every reason to believe they're lying, because lying about that is a known and well-established Fash tactic. I don't think you have a weird voice, you have a nice voice. I have very complex feelings about my own voice, but yours sounds lovely.
About their beliefs, unless there's evidence they believe otherwise. It's called inductive reasoning.
That's actually not what's called inductive reasoning. I mean, inductive reasoning is something that you can use in order to kind of work that out, to analyze that. But, I mean, what he just said is not called inductive reasoning. He's like almost like Tim Pool level master class, completely misdefining every single term that he introduces into the discussion.
Sure. But you also have to realize that, okay, have you ever heard the term Lucy in the football?
No, I haven't. Well, I assume it has to do with like Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown when he goes to kick it.
Okay, a very good example. Very good example. I'm looking forward to where you're going with this because it makes perfect sense in this context.
He does the flip and he gets
Every
debated.
single time, and Charlie Brown falls for it. And does Charlie Brown look like an idiot? Yes.
Yeah,
So
he does.
a lot of people are like, once a Nazi, always a Nazi, which I don't believe that, but there's that much, anger for people to say that what Nazis have done. So, these people could say this shit, but unless they do something drastic, that people can see or do, it's hard to be accepting of these people, and
yeah,
for you to just say, dude, you got.
And I think that is absolutely, totally reasonable. I mean, when somebody in Twitter called it Xena the Warrior Princess levels of atonement, and I think that's good. I mean, if I'm gonna believe somebody, being somebody who has all sorts of personal reasons that Nazis would target me, and actually has a history of being targeted by them. Okay. There's a guy in the credit sequence of Crosstalk on Russia Today who actually tried to start this fucking smear campaign against me because I pointed out that it was wrong to blame the Jews on the Kennedy assassination, which he was doing. This guy's also ex-NSA and stuff. So it's like, given that history, and just given, just the sort of shit Fash do, yeah, what I want to see is somebody who's taken some serious fucking personal risks in order to make amends. Who has actually done things that are uncomfortable for them, that is, burnt bridges. Okay, I guess you could break the bridges too. I mean, the bridge is fucked up one way or another. Who has actually, taken some level of risk in order... That does make it a lot more credible. Anyone can just kind of say, yeah, okay, I was Nazi yesterday, now I'm not one. Hi there, hello, fellow leftists. Anyone can do that. But the more risk that's involved, the more credibility it has with me. The more effort as well.
You guys are totally cool, totally believe everything you say now. If you just shut up about Nazi and you're totally welcome. And it's
no,
like,
it's them changing their
that's what you're
opinions and their
saying.
behavior. I care about people.
How though?
How though?
How do you know they've changed their beliefs? How do you know that? You don't.
Yeah, and again, we keep coming back to this, and the reason that we keep coming back to this is because Xander Hall deflects the question. He gives some vague bullshit, like, oh, well, it's their opinions and their behavior. Well, like, for example, I guess here's one way you could say that. You're gonna demand that of people? Let's change the... I mean,
Because they don't do things Nazis do. They don't say slurs. They don't engage in Nazi rhetoric. You can't prove a negative.
Online.
Yeah, you can. You can prove some negatives.
Online, but in their head, and what they do, it's still Nazi shit. They're like, okay, I better not do that stupid shit because I just get banned from everywhere.
So they're only a Nazi in their head. They don't say or do anything Nazi-like.
Or not Nazi online, Hey, but okay, is that...
I mean, and he's acting like this is a totally unreasonable scenario, but it is a reality. This is a thing fascists do. Anyone who remembers Occupy remembers all the... I mean, that was like a bonanza, a fucking smorgasbord of fash sidling up tactics, fash infiltration tactics, where they would come on with that third position shit and say, yeah, actually, when you look at it a certain way, like by squinting and having 3 layers of, I guess, translucent glass between you and the facts, we actually kind of want the same thing, isn't it? And we're not, the left and right paradigm's just so outdated, man, and all this sort of shit. I mean, this is a thing, but of course he has a definite interest. And Caleb Muppet, who also really hates the idea of people pointing out how dog whistles work, also has a very definite interest in not having people really engage in the sort of analysis that he will superficially give lip service to.
Like,
So they don't do
okay,
anything Nazi-like, then it doesn't matter because they're not hurting anybody.
online. I'm
Because you
saying
can't know
online
when
in front of,
someone's...
in the public. This is one of the problems with
Oh,
Nazis.
but
They
like
are
in the
totally
public,
Nazis
so...
behind the wall.
Yeah, I mean he's acting. See, the thing is, this guy's fash. I mean, well, oh, he's ex-fash. I'm sorry. He made a YouTube video, so we can know that. Um, if he was in those circles for any length of time, he knows this is a thing that not only do they do, it's something they discuss in detail. It is a major topic of conversation. How to go about doing this stuff, how to show up in left circles and recruit. And you can see lots of examples of this happening. Like, I mean, the people around the so-called dirtbag left who have just sort of very carefully sort of sidled rightward for the past couple of years, to the extent that some of them now are just very openly on the far right, and others are like half an inch away. That is a fucking recruiting tactic. It is something that is done. It is something that they pass on knowledge about how to do it well. This is, I mean, if he doesn't know about this stuff, then, I mean, I just don't buy that he doesn't know about this stuff, given his background.
What?
Okay, most of the time Nazis are Nazis online, and typically they go mask on when they're in public.
There's way more Nazis that do not show themselves as a Nazi.
Hold on, are we
If
talking
you don't
about
think that,
talking about internet Nazis,
all
Aryan
Nazis.
Brotherhood, Nazi gangs? Because these are very different communities.
Anybody, yeah, any Nazi.
They're not that different. I mean, there's significant overlap between all of them. Yeah, I got it. The wall, closed doors, same concept.
That's the thing is you seem to be talking about we have to forgive all Nazis, you know, and I'm like, yeah.
Wait,
little
forgive all Nazis?
edgelords.
No, not forgive all Nazis.
Well, I mean, it kind of sounded like that,
Except
but okay.
people who used to be reactionaries. This includes Nazis
Well,
to
okay,
conservatives to
all Nazis that
anti-SJWs who have
just say that
changed.
they're good.
Why do you
All
keep
Nazis that
saying just say
good.
it they're good? People who
Because that's what you.
aren't
That's, I mean,
Nazis
that's all you
anymore.
have to do. That's all you have to do to get back into your good grace.
Yeah, I mean, true. That is, he's never given any kind of standard. He actually objects to the idea that any kind of discomfort should be involved in the process. The idea that maybe any kind of making amends might be necessary, anything like that. Really, he has objected to every single standard that's been put forward.
It's just be like, I was a Nazi, but now I'm not anymore. Teehee.
You think
And
that's
then
it?
I
After
don't
everything
think-
we've
what?
talked about, you genuinely think that's it? You think that someone could come in and say, I'm not a Nazi anymore, and then go and be a Nazi, and I'd be okay with it? I wouldn't...
Yeah, well, I mean, yes. I mean, that's kind of the founding principle of your fucking community, Xanderhole. I mean, it is led by a guy who said, tee-hee, I'm not a Nazi anymore, and still smuggles in all sorts of far-right bullshit, and defends it.
Not be a
immediately ban
Nazi.
them? Do things
Well,
that
no.
Nazis do.
No,
Do
but-
things that reactionaries do.
No, but the people of color know what those people are
Like, make YouTube videos about fucking woke skulls.
like. That it's usually just somebody that is just saying it so they don't get chastised by everybody, you know. And
If there is a
they
person
they
of
still hold
color...
those beliefs. They still hold those beliefs. They still hold those beliefs, but just don't say it online. You know what I mean? So it's tough.
Oh, God. I mean, you see, it's clear that he just doesn't really care about the real stakes for this for anyone beyond his own brand.
Tough to say this person is, you know, like you said, you can't know, and so that's the problem. Is like,
Chat, this is the same argument against trans people in bathrooms, bruh. No, it totally fucking isn't, because trans people, by and large, aren't ex-Nazis?
I don't know.
If they're secretly racist or secretly a Nazi and they're not hurting anybody because they're not saying or doing anything Nazi-like, then how would you even know?
They go to Nazi marches on the weekend. You're just like,
then how would I know?
That's gullible as shit, bro.
So do I just not believe anyone who says that they're not a Nazi?
Yeah, you shouldn't immediately believe that shit. You simply should not just believe that. They need to actually provide some proof.
Because what if they're in real life, unless I know their exact identity, they're going out and doing Nazi marches, and they're going to Charlottesville 2.0?
But don't give them priority to people of color who'd rather not.
What do you mean by give them priority? My goal isn't to preach to the
choir.
choir.
You say you're giving them priority. You just said it's all.
Oh, and this is funny because we got onto this complete digression because Jesse had said, that clearly his space was meant for right-wingers and people adjacent to them, and rather than respond directly to it, he totally changed the subject, and now he's going back to this, I didn't want to preach to the choir.
What would you say if my channel was about white-splaining the oppression of black people to black people?
That his channel is about that. He's got a whole video where, he does exactly that, attacking Professor Flowers for pointing out that that what white nationalists say about decolonization is wrong, actually. Which, for Xander Hole, is the same thing as her supporting genocide. He has literally done this thing.
That sounds like what you want me to do here.
Nobody's saying do that. Nobody's saying do that.
Well, maybe this is actually before he went and made that video where he used white nationalist talking points to oppose decolonization and white-splain colonization and decolonization to Professor Flowers. Maybe this is before that, and that's why he went and did that. I have to check the date of this.
Nobody's saying do that. I think what you do best is show, I guess, more progressive leftist views, and you bring them to the table that people might not know about as much. You don't have to be like a white savior thing. Nobody's expecting you to be that. But to say that you're
yeah, because it would require some possibility of salvation coming from him. And do you see salvation coming from that fucking guy?
Haven for some, is there an ex-Nazi, is like, it's tough. And it's tough for people of color to be like, yeah, that's great, I want to be around there. So
that's are you talking about
it's a lot more complicated than what you're doing. Like, how you're going about it, and what you're saying, and what you're doing, it's so much more complicated.
Are you talking about being accepted in the left as a political movement, or being accepted in social spaces such as Discord servers and Twitter groups? And
which I don't honestly think, when we're talking about a politicized social space that is supposed to be like, I mean, when his social space includes like chats about should the left accept ex-Nazis, such as they are, then this so you can't like make this sort of this cut and dry distinction between these social spaces and movement spaces. I've never actually seen any sign of these being different things all the time that I've been in some kind of leftism. And that's, let's see, God, like 21 years now, it's been a bit. The social spaces and the movement spaces, they're the same thing. You go to the protests, you go to the pub afterwards. I mean, especially in like, and you have like anarchist social centers that are then movement spaces, and also where people go to socialize and have a few drinks or play chess or pool or whatever, and write letters to prisoners or whatever is on the agenda on a given day. I mean, this idea that social spaces and movement spaces are somehow, like, totally separate and distinct, I've just never seen any sign of it.
And friend groups.
Basically, you've said all. You've said all. You've said social spaces, you've said the left.
I've
You
never
said
once
all
said
things.
I've never once said that if you feel uncomfortable with someone who used to be a Nazi, that you should be forced to have them in your social group.
Well, yes, but only because what he did say was that you should leave.
Or
I
that you
think
should be
what
forced to interact with
it came
them.
off is you don't have to be in that social group anymore. That's how it kind of came off.
That's not just how it came off. That's what he said. He said it 3
I
times.
said that
If you don't want,
everybody has the right to discriminate who they want to be friends with based on what those people believe or how they behave.
but okay, but I'm talking about leftists that maybe would be in a social group that the Nazi came into.
Oh, here's somebody in the chat says, why would a crypto-Nazi pretending to be a leftist say they were originally a Nazi? Well, because you can get all kinds of YouTube clout with it.
Now that person has to leave, because they're like, yeah, they'd
They
rather
don't
have
have
this
to
piece
leave.
of shit that.
What they do is
Well,
completely their decision.
I mean,
Well, except that it isn't really, because what you've said is that you don't think that the ex-Nazi should leave or should have any expectations, conditions put on their presence in the space, and that people who are uncomfortable with that, who are uncomfortable with the presence of somebody who maybe genuinely is an ex-Nazi, maybe actually is not actually really all that ex, should just fuck off. I mean, that's what he said several times. We heard it.
yeah, I mean, you're just saying that. You're just like, buck up, bro, or just get out.
Should
Yes.
I ban
Like, that's
that
what you're saying right
person?
there.
Wait, should I ban that? What would you have me do?
No, but it's just a lot more complicated, and I think that
Well, first of all, I wouldn't have somebody like Xander Hole making that decision in the first place. I mean, that is the most absolutely buck wild part of this, because the last people that need to be making these decisions, that need to be telling leftists about what standards they should have for letting people who claim to be ex-Nazis into their spaces, is partially reformed ex-Nazis. That's something ex-Nazis should sit back and shut the fuck up about. I mean, in general, that's one of the things that they really ought to be doing, is sitting back and listening and shutting the fuck up. I've said that quite a few times. They need to realize they got a lot to learn. Something that Zanderhole would actually benefit from as well. I hope maybe... Well, I mean, he's still fairly young. Young enough that he thinks Gen X and Boomers are the same fucking generation. That says something. But maybe eventually he will actually sit down and do that kind of work and realize just how fucked up even this phase of his life is. But it is what ex-Nazis should be doing. They should not be lecturing people about, them about not being accepting enough of people who claim to be former Nazis. That's not for those people to be deciding. If one of them, well, I will make an exception there. If one of them says, "Yeah, I don't trust that guy. I know him. This is he does this thing where he kind of infiltrates his way into left spaces. I would be very careful with him." I do want to hear that. That is the sort of thing that real ex-Nazis could really contribute, is their knowledge of the people in those circles. That's something that I do want to hear from them on. And it's interesting, guys like fucking Zanderhole here. I think his name is now officially fucking Zanderhole here. I think I've called him that so many times, it is now his name. They want to talk about just about anything but the things that we need to know about those circles.
Yeah, it's complicated. If it
going-
gets to be a problem, I'll deal with it. I've had
you're
situations where
just like-
people have had disagreements over things, and I sorted it out. I was like, hey, stop doing that. Keep it in private, or don't talk to each other. If one of you
that doesn't
sees
happen
the
all
other
the time
person,
too.
then...
I mean, that would be good.
Or block,
That
or
would-
if it's Discord or my chat, you can block people in my chat and
Yeah, you can block people, but that's not the problem. That's completely irrelevant to this discussion. This discussion is about the conditions on which we're willing to accept that somebody who claims to be an ex-Nazi really is one, and is someone we trust enough to let them into left spaces. That's what this discussion is about. It's not about that there's the technological capacity to block people. We know that there's the technological capacity to block people. I mean, I've blocked this fucking Xander hole here on Twitter, for example. I'm good with the whole blocking thing. That is not the question. He wants to talk about everything but the question.
And Twitch chat and on my Discord, right? You can literally block them and they can't see what you say and you can't see what they say, right? So like nobody gets banned.
Okay, but the people that see you as being like, you guys are both just as welcome.
Yeah,
is
they are.
Just they see that as, I know. And what I'm trying to tell you is people, not all people of color. I'm not saying all people of color, but people of color that I know, they would be like, oh, dude, that guy is just like simping to Nazis. You know, like he's just like, if anybody wants to be just tell him that they're cool and get into his chat and sit there, like he's gonna do it. You know, and it's like, you know, it's tough. You know.
Yeah. I mean, that. I've heard that exact assessment. That's actually a fairly common critique I've heard of this, the whole ex-Nazi grift, where people, in addition, it isn't enough for them to, like, no longer be Nazis. They have to have a Patreon about it.
So.
I don't know, dude. I'm going to be honest with you. I think that I would have been way more turned off from leftism or the progressive movement if when I looked at...
You're not turned on to it now.
Like from the outside in, if I saw people saying the shit that you're saying, feeling like... And this is very important to remember. Are you familiar with the idea of isolation when it comes to radicalizing people to the far right?
Okay, this should be interesting. But the thing is... I mean, so what he's saying is that if the left had been more, had some kind of standards when it comes to dealing with people who claim to be ex-Nazis, that we might have been spared him. And I really don't see how that's a bad thing. I wouldn't have minded. I mean, yes, admittedly, I'm getting good content out of this. Thank you, Xanderhole. There's, like, all sorts of good content, that is being created out of the shit that drops out of the Xanderhole. But, I mean, I would have found other things to do if he had decided to just work on himself rather than immediately starting a grift on the left with his ex-Nazi-ness.
I assume you're not. This is a very classic tactic used way before the internet was a thing, way before you were even born, when it came to radical groups, particularly when it came to Nazi and white power groups. What they would do is they would radicalize young, vulnerable people, usually found in the street, usually in a bad situation or in prison, and what they would do is they'd isolate them. They would isolate them from... Church is one too, yeah, sure. And they would isolate them from family. That's one of the biggest. Sure. And they would isolate them from friends and family. Because if you had nowhere else to turn, you had nowhere else to go. You were...
Yeah, I mean... And, I mean, that's a thing. That's a real thing. That's a thing cults love to do. Although, at the same time, it kind of cuts both ways. Because if the group is encouraging you to cut ties with your friends and families, that's one thing. If your friends and family, people who you know have always been there for you, are starting to get really, really disgusted with the stuff that you're saying, sometimes that's actually the sort of thing that gets people out of these kind of groups. I mean, I've seen that from, like, ex-Nazis who I actually have a lot more trust for than this prick, who said that actually that was the thing. It was the realizing that, it was being called Nazi scum by people, for example. Being, actually, that kind of shunning, that kind of shaming actually led to introspection. So there's a difference between one of these groups doing it on their terms and the people around you doing it on their terms. I mean, those are not quite the same thing. Sometimes they can have the same effect. Sometimes these things are synergistic, where the disgust of the people, like the decent people around you, actually contributes to the isolation, and it contributes to your commitment to the fash. But it doesn't have to, actually. It all very much depends on exactly how all of this is done.
stuck with the Aryan Brotherhood, you were
Nobody-
stuck with the
nobody's
neo-Nazi
disagreeing
movement,
with you
and it
there.
works the same way online. They push you to a point where you are so unpalatable to everywhere else that you have no other communities to go to. You feel like no one else will accept you, and you have nowhere to go. You're too far into it to get out of it now. And when I was going down the right-wing rabbit hole, the alt-right rabbit hole, if I saw people on the left talking like you were instead of the open communities that I
This is such a fucking ridiculous form of emotional blackmail.
became a part of as I started to get into leftism and into progressive ideology, then I would have been pushed away because I would have felt like there's no going back. I've gone too far. I can never get out of this. No one will ever accept me. I'm done.
And the thing is, you're still not out of this. You've just found a way to sort of bring that bullshit into left spaces, and it's not a good thing.
My entire social life is done. No one will ever accept me. I'm too far in. I'm in too deep.
Listen, I told you that I don't agree with people saying that stuff to people that say they're ex-Nazis online. I don't think that's good.
But the stuff you have been saying in this entire debate is the same kind of shit that will have made those people feel that way if they were anybody who is like,
I don't really give a shit whether they feel that way. They should feel that they are actually looked down on for being disgusting assholes. They should feel that way. In fact, that actually, as I said, I mean, there's evidence that actually works to get people out of this life. But that's not, I mean, the fact that you did, just because it will hurt the feelings of people who are violating the trust of just about everybody decent by becoming fascists, to know that what people think about fuckers who do that does not mean that we should be, like, softening our view of those fuckers. It means that if they're truly X, they will understand that, and they will actually kind of feel that way about themselves. Because it isn't actually wrong.
On the fence right now, who's been moving a little bit more to the left away from the Nazi shit because they've been watching my content, and there's some silent person who doesn't talk in the chat that's watching right now.
You don't know that. You don't know that. Like, that's just a thing.
I am very sure of that because the idea of isolation when it comes to radical cult-like groups like the far right, this has been a thing that has been well studied and practiced for a long time.
And the thing is, there's also a difference here. Because the way isolation works is that you have absolutely no interpersonal connections outside of the group. Well, if it's successful, that's how it is. That can be counteracted with as much as, look, what you're doing something really fucked up here, but if you ever start to question, if you ever start to wonder if this is the right thing that you should be doing, I'm there, call me, but not before that. You know, something like that maintains an individual connection that can serve as a bridge to get out. That's not the same thing as letting them into your movement space and demanding that they go completely unquestioned.
So
way before either of us were even born.
So these little hard-ass edgelords that could just be jokesters and take all these jokes and harass other people, the second a leftist says you might be a dick, they're like, cry!
Yeah!
You know, like, I'm not saying
Holy
it's good, but
shit.
it's like, you're just saying,
I'm curious if you know how bad faith what you just said was.
No, I don't see how, okay. I'm guessing we're gonna find that there's a very new, meaning of bad faith that works, only when you're sitting in Xander Hole's little fucking gamer chair.
What? Where?
You just said these edgelords who are so fun making jokes, if they hear someone say they're an asshole, they're going to be like, well, there's no going back, no. Now, no, if they felt like there was no way that they were going to be accepted in any other group, in any lefty group, there was no social spaces where they would be accepted, and they're going to feel like they've become too ostracized from the rest of society to get out. What?
Where have been these social spaces that have exiled these ex-Nazis? You're just seeing one or two tweets.
I don't know.
Like
the tweets with tens of thousands of likes saying once a Nazi, always a Nazi. You'll never be accepted. We'll never feel safe around you. You don't belong in the leftist movement.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, people have there's a difference between that's just God. There's just so much shit that needs to be unpacked here. It's actually painful.
There are a couple of those that are very extreme.
With tens
Some of them aren't,
thousands.
But you know what?
These are the biggest tweets. Tens of thousands of likes.
Okay, but where have those Nazis been kicked out of social spaces? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they've been like they've been, people have said that, and it's
And why shouldn't they be kicked out of social spaces? I mean, because now, see what he's done now. I mean, this is really clever. And I mean, Jesse, maybe this is what you mean when you say you missed a big one. But he's gone from worrying about the feelings of hypothetical so-called ex-Nazis to worrying that our opposition to fascists and all they stand for might be hurting the feeling of people who are still Nazis right now. He is a volunteer Nazi emotional support technician. Is this the one? Okay, just
shitty and blah blah
if
blah.
I miss what you
but
missed, let me
where have they been
know.
actually kicked out? It's like
I don't know. What about we
that's
go back
not-
to the example of that one tweet that we were talking about earlier, where that person was being sent literal death threats? I'd say that's tantamount to being kicked out of some social spaces.
Well, except it's Twitter, and do we see? We're just kind of having to accept on faith this thing about literal death threats, and I don't feel. See, I'm no more content to just believe him talking about literal death threats as I am when TERFs talk about online death threats and then never have screenshots to back them up.
But the thing is Nazis do way more death threats. So, I mean, everybody does. It's shitty. I don't think it's good.
Well, there we go.
But everybody. I mean, you were telling people to go
Feel
kill
free to
themselves
explain it. It sounded like it was interesting.
like 3 times on your last stream.
You got me, dude.
Oh, hello?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh.
Do you think
I
me
thought you
making a joke about someone shoving their head into blender is the same as sending someone a death threat?
Yeah, depending on the context, yeah. Depending, I mean, there are lots of jokes about heads in blenders. I mean, you could be making a fucking joke about the Gremlins movie. That would be different. But there are certainly jokes about that kind of shit that would be meant and would be received as suggesting that that is the sort of violence that should or might be visited upon the recipient. That is... So, I mean, that is potentially the same thing. I mean, lots of abusers will couch their threats in jokes.
No, but you're telling people to go kill themselves, and death threats are usually just bullshit anyways. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's the same.
Do you think...
I don't know. I mean, I will say, having received a few myself, fortunately not many and not recently, so no particular concern required. I mean, they're not a comfortable thing to receive. Yeah, they're probably bullshit, but anything like that, I think you have to take really, really seriously. You have to know everything you can about who it's coming from, how you might have picked this person up, and, do a serious check to see if this is somebody who has any way of carrying it out. And if you can find out about their history and stuff. I think any kind of death threat, anything like that, absolutely always take it really seriously and immediately look into the sender of it.
I'm pretty sure that person
I think it's almost more dangerous. It's almost more dangerous to tell people to kill themselves than you're going to kill them. So, I think it's more dangerous, because...
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, because, I mean, there will be people who are so inclined and who will do it if somebody tells them that. There may be somebody listening, choked on water, who already was thinking in those terms and would hear that and decide that that's the fucking deciding factor. I mean, people who are in that frame of mind aren't necessarily going to be making the most totally rational decision about who to listen to because because a lot of the time they already have decided that they personally suck. And they're already kind of biased in favor of that. So yeah, I mean, I think that is an entirely valid thing to say.
People that usually say they're gonna kill you, like, you'd say that jokingly. I'm gonna kill you, like just stupid shit sometimes. So
Yeah, like Kyle Rittenhouse's lawyer said it to his wife in a text message. And then, no, he didn't actually have to deal with any consequences because he said he didn't mean it and he was sorry. I mean, it was an extremely graphic death threat, though, but it was, it was just memes.
yeah, we're getting off on some stupid shit right here, but whatever.
Wait, what you just said is unbelievably stupid. The idea that someone messaging you saying that, like I've had people send me my parents' address and say they're gonna like this is the kind of shit that this person was getting, and you think that's tantamount to?
I've had that shit too. I've had like a band of fucking hillbillies come to my goddamn house and like shit. So yeah, bro, like don't tell me. Yeah, man. I understand, but everybody gets harassed. Black people get that shit.
Oh, trust me, I know black people get harassed on the internet. That doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about right now.
It does kind of, though, because what you're talking about is the people who decided to join a political movement that says that that's a good thing, that there should be more of that kind of harassment, that it should be intensified and become more violent. We're just supposed to kind of accept when they say, oh, change my mind about that. You gotta accept me. I'm on base. I mean, so yeah, it does kind of enter into this a bit.
We're talking about
Yeah,
the
but I'm just saying
acceptance of
that
ex-reactionaries and leftist communities and social spaces.
Sure. Well, we got off on some shit, so.
What is?
Well, yeah,
what is
I mean, it isn't so much that you got off on some shit. It's more that Xandra Hall, every time we get anywhere near having a real discussion about how you could really kind of, what is somebody who is ex-fash could do in order to earn people's trust, to regain the trust that they squandered by becoming Nazis in the first place, he immediately moves it around to this other repetitive bullshit. And that's got to be more discouraging than anything to somebody who's considering leaving the far right who's listening to this. I mean, if it were me, I would want to actually have hear a discussion that was a fairly clear roadmap to know what the standard that I might be held to was, so you could kind of brace yourself for it and kind of prepare for it and really give some serious thought to all of it. But I mean, he's keeping it vague and avoiding any kind of objective standard, which on the one hand makes it very easy for crypto-fash to just kind of infiltrate left spaces if people apply this bullshit. But on the other hand, does not actually provide any kind of clarity for somebody who's on the right and is looking to maybe leave, for how they might be able to sort of get in good standing with people who aren't massive pricks.
You're like, if you could summarize your entire issue with me or what I was saying in one or two sentences or a short paragraph, what would it be?
It's a bunch of bullshit. There, one sentence.
Yeah. I think you are conflating levels of people, like alt-light or like edgelords to...
One thing to note, the term alt-light, I mean, that started in the media. They sort of seized on that a couple of years ago as if that were a distinct category, when actually that is just an insult Nazis throw around. If somebody suggests that maybe they're not quite as enthusiastic about genocide as somebody else in a discussion, they'll just jokingly call them alt-light. It's an insult that they bandy about, but it's never been a specific, distinct organizational structure. I mean, a lot of people miss that. I mean, because that got so much coverage in the media as if it really were a real thing, but it's just a fash insult for fash.
full-blown crazy Nazis. And when you say that they're all just as forgivable if they say they're good, it's just looks bad, and
You know, and what I would say is, I don't entirely rule out anyone really surprising me in a way that regains my trust. I don't rule it out. But the more fucked up the shit they've been getting up to is, the harder it will be, the more I will expect of them before I would even consider ever trusting them enough to accept them in the same space I'm in. I mean, it's a sliding scale, and and it's not something that you can be all that concrete about. It's not like a fucking recipe. I mean, not a baking recipe, anything. If anything, it's like a seasoning recipe. It's a curry recipe where there's a lot of leeway on exactly the composition of the ingredients, and a lot of people have different ways of doing it, and Jamie Oliver fucks it up. I mean, I'll say the more fucked up, the more heavily involved, the more violent, the more actually for real about it is, and the less just all talk they were, the less chance I see of them actually redeeming themselves, and the more I would expect out of them in order to really be able to even consider trusting them. I don't entirely rule anything out, but I think certain things are extremely fucking unlikely. And it is entirely reasonable to say that somebody who was sort of skimming the surface of, online far-right shitlordism and was maybe a prick to people online and joined some fucking dog piles and stuff like that, and a couple of months after that they got bored with it and realized, actually, this is really fucked up what I'm doing, this is a horrible thing to be doing to people, and decided to stop doing that. I mean, that would take less to convince me that they were for real about abandoning that way of life than somebody who, say, drives across state lines with an AR-15 to open fire on an unarmed crowd and then gets a nice little drink of water after shooting 3 people from the cops. Yeah, see, somebody like that, it would take, like fucking Xena the Warrior Princess levels of atonement to even be considered potentially worthy of ever being trusted again, and even then it would be unlikely. I mean, and I think we should not be basing this on this sort of emotional blackmail where somebody like Xanderhole says, oh, well, this'll hurt Nazis' feelings if they hear this. Well, guess what? It's not just about Nazis' feelings. It's not just about the feelings of Nazis who haven't even decided to become ex-Nazis. It is also about our fucking safety. And it's not just about feeling comfortable, though that also comes into it. That is a reasonable thing to be concerned with. It is about physical safety. It is about operational security. It is about what kind of access to information people who join our groups have, and where else that information might just end up. And it is entirely reasonable to take that very seriously and apply strict standards and not just... Yeah, I mean, exactly, fuck Nazis' feelings. In fact, hurting Nazis' feelings is proven to be a way to make them consider becoming ex-Nazis, because they realize, wow, everybody thinks I'm a piece of shit, maybe they've got a point. And yeah, they do have a point, Nazis. Any Nazis who at some point are ever listening to this and are wondering if the fact that people make them feel like a piece of shit for being pieces of shit might have a point about them being pieces of shit, yeah, you're a piece of shit. But maybe you can stop being a piece of shit. But yeah, that'll take some fucking effort on your part, and don't expect a free ride. There, that's my pitch to reforming Nazis right there. I mean, but honestly, fuck them. There aren't enough of them that we need to worry about reforming them. That's the most ridiculous thing about this. It's a tiny number of people who are actually active on the far right. You could actually put them in Sophia Garden Stadium in Cardiff, the cricket ground there, and they would only fill one stand, and not even entirely that. But yeah, so fuck their feelings.
You look bad to people of color when you're like, yeah, these gnarly ass just pieces of shit are just totally welcome, and you're not as welcome if you can't deal with them being here.
Okay.
I think that's kind of...
There's a lot that I would like to take apart, but there was one part that stuck out to me the most, and I'm really curious. Do you think somebody that used to be a Nazi who realizes it's wrong and reforms and is no longer a Nazi, do you think that person is a piece of shit?
Okay. Funny, I just kind of answered this. Yeah, I mean... And again, this is going to just be the end of this for tonight, because it's almost 1 o'clock, and it's kind of a nice stopping point. But yeah, I mean, it all depends on what that reforms looks like. If that person goes at great personal risk, breaks up Nazi groups, gives us information about how they function, say what connections they've got to the local police, who they're talking to there, gives us contact information, gives us alt accounts and things, gives us login information, gives us the kind of stuff we need in order to fuck their shit up properly, then will begin to believe it. I mean, I've got a reformed Nazi character in my novel. And that's the level of shit that he does that actually kind of proves himself. He totally risks his life in order to fuck up the shit of a large number of Nazis. That's not giving anything in the plot away, really, except for that one thing. But I think that's reasonable to expect, especially if they were deep into it, especially if they were really involved, especially if they were, say, I don't know, the sort of person who gets acquitted in Kenosha. Yeah, those people, they need to absolutely fucking take great personal risks in order to prove themselves and to fuck up Nazis if they ever want to be accepted as not being Nazis. And with that, I guess we're going to go wrap it up for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. And, Jesse, glad to have you here for longer this time, because it's really cool having you in here while I'm commenting on a video that you're in. And so, I mean, really, we're going to be doing this one again. I think we might actually finish it tomorrow, or get close to it anyway. And love to have your insights on this stuff, on your just experience of having this conversation as well. That has been actually added a very enjoyable dimension to the whole thing. So good night, and see you tomorrow at 11:30 Eastern Time to 1 a.m. Thank you again for joining me.